"The surgery went well, Mrs. Evelyn. Now you just need to rest," the doctor's voice echoed from a distance. I opened my eyes, bleached white room, antiseptic smell, the steady beep of a heart monitor. It wasn't the incision that hurt. It was the emptiness around the hospital bed. I looked around four walls, a wilted flower, and silence. I reached for my phone. My texts were still unread. I went online, and my world exploded. My son and daughter-in-law were laughing under the Eiffel Tower. While I swallowed cold water to ease my thirst, they raised wine glasses on my card. I didn't cry. I just stared at the screen and saw one thing clearly. Once love is traded for convenience, it stops having value. And right then, under the steady beeps, I realized it was time to pull the IV out of my old life. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. My name is Evelyn Mercer, 70 years old, living in Round Rock, Texas, a quiet small town where people still wave over garden gates and share apple pie on weekends. I used to be an accountant, worked nearly 40 years before retiring. After my husband, Bill, died of heart disease, this house held only me and memories. My son, Jacob, lives with his wife, Clara, in Austin, only a 20-minute drive, but sometimes it feels like an ocean lies between us. I once thought old age would be peaceful, gardening out back, baking for the kids, welcoming family every weekend. Turns out, the scariest part isn't loneliness. It's when the people you love most live close by, but their hearts left long ago. My surgery was on Monday morning at St. David's Hospital in Austin. I thought someone would wait in the hallway, Jacob, my son, or his wife, Clara. It's only a 20-minute drive, but when the doctor asked, "Do you have family waiting outside?" I stayed quiet. They skimmed past my name like it no longer mattered. At 70, I thought I was used to being alone. I wasn't. Some kinds of emptiness still bite, even when that heart has just been stitched back together. I stayed in the hospital for 2 weeks. On day 1, I still hoped they'd come late. On day 2, I told the nurse my kids were probably busy. By day 5, she looked at me, eyes soft with pity. "Your family's traveling in Europe, right?" I turned, thinking I misheard. "Traveling?" She pressed her lips together, then lowered her voice. "I heard the other nurses say so. They're in Paris. Paris." The words slid down my spine like a cold blade. I opened my phone. The signal was weak, but the pictures were crystal clear. My son posing under the Eiffel Tower, his smile filling the screen. Clara, my daughter-in-law, wearing the dress I gave her for her birthday last year, with a caption, "Finally living for myself." That line choked me. Living for yourself with whose money? The credit card I let them borrow was paying for a luxury hotel in Paris. I pulled the blanket over my face and swallowed back tears. The only sound left was the metronome of the heart monitor, cold as a clock counting down the minutes until I woke up not just from surgery, but from an illusion about family. I thought back on the years I lived for them. After my husband Bill died of heart disease, I worked as an accountant and raised 2 kids. I shouldered the mortgage, worked overtime, skipped sleep so they could attend good schools. Jacob used to say, "Mom, you're the strongest person I know." I believed him. I thought kindness, sacrifice, and love were investments that would pay back as gratitude. I was wrong. One morning, a nurse brought a newspaper. I stared at the headline but couldn't read a word. Everything blurred behind tears. When she asked, "Is someone coming to pick you up?" I gave a thin smile. "They're probably still shopping in Europe." 2 days later, I was discharged. They signed papers, handed me meds, explained the diet. No one came. I called a taxi myself. The young driver opened the door. "I'm surprised to see me alone with a hospital bag." "No family picking you up?" I answered softly. They've gone far away. He thought I meant somewhere else and just nodded. I knew far wasn't about miles, it was about how final it felt. On the way home, I looked out the window. Families on weekend walks, kids laughing, parents holding hands. I used to be part of those scenes. Now I was just a spectator, looking through glass, watching a kind of happiness I had paid for but never received. When the taxi stopped in front of my little house on the edge of Round Rock, the late sun slanted across the yard. The grass out front was up to my knees, the mailbox stuffed with papers and late notices. I braced myself with a cane. The anesthesia still made me sway. The front door was ajar, the hinge squeaking. A musty, dusty smell rose like from an abandoned place. I flipped the light. A weak yellow glow spread over a thin coat of dust. On the kitchen counter, a pile of unpaid bills and banknotes. I picked up the credit card statement numbers, ran like a scar. $4,860 at the Ritz Paris, $1,200 at Maison Dior, $730 at Le Grand Colbert. I went numb. The card was in my name. They used it without a word. Not one text asking, "Mom, are you okay?" Just invoices. I set the paper down and sat in the old wooden kitchen chair. The dining table still had a scratch where Bill used to set his coffee cup. I ran my hand over it and whispered, "You see this, Bill?" I kept my promise, I raised them. But they learned to forget faster than I ever imagined. Outside, the yard turned orange in the sunset, light sliding through the window across my face. Half of me wanted to scream, to call, to ask why. The other half, tired after 70 years of holding it all, stayed quiet. I had forgiven indifference, sharp words, and empty dinners. This time was different. This time, they left me between life and death and went on vacation. That night I lay on the sofa, staring at the ceiling. Everything in the house felt familiar and foreign. On the wall opposite, our family photo, me, Jacob, Clara, and the two grandkids grinning wide in a Christmas picture from 3 years ago. I remember roasting the turkey, setting the table, waiting until 8 p.m. before they showed up. They ate fast, smiled tight, and left before I could brew coffee. "Mom, we've got plans with friends, you understand," Clara said, pulling on her coat. I nodded. I always nodded. Now, looking at that photo, I realized I'd grown so used to being left out that I forgot what it felt like to be included. I sighed, eyes on the window frame. Outside, wind ran through the oaks, leaves rustling. In that sound, I heard my heartbeat, slow, steady. Each beat reminded me I still had time. This time, I would use it for me. I went to the drawer, took out the small notebook Bill once gave me. The leather was worn, the corners yellowed. I wrote my first line in years, July 14th. I survived, and I was left behind. I looked up and around the house. Nothing moved. No one came in. Just me and a strange lightness. In the end, silence is a kind of answer too. I let out a rough little laugh. If they can walk away without looking back, I can disappear too, but not the way they'd expect. I stood, opened the window. Night air rushed in, earth, jasmine, and a little freedom slipping past the stitches that still ached. A hazy plan took shape, not to get revenge, but to reclaim the last bit of fairness my life deserved. I turned off the lights, drew the curtains, and for the first time in months, I felt brighter than the moon on the porch. Tomorrow, I'll start over, no pickup, no instructions, no apologies needed. Just me. Evelyn Mercer, 70 years old, the woman, reborn by her own loneliness. I walked slowly down the hall, my footsteps echoing like I was in a stranger's house. Every room, every object was familiar, yet I felt like I was standing inside someone else's memories, not my own. This house once greeted mornings with laughter, coffee, and Bill's voice. Now there was only plaster and wind slipping through an unlatched window. I brushed a photo by the stairs, our first Thanksgiving after Bill died. Jacob stood in the middle with his arm around his wife. I was at the edge of the frame, wearing a smile so stiff even I wouldn't recognize it. A pinch shot through my chest. These pictures were mirrors that didn't reflect the present. They just reminded me I'd been pushed out of my own family's story long ago. I stepped into the living room. The room Bill called the heart of the house was bare, just a thin layer of dust on the oak table. On the TV stand, a few old Christmas gifts still wrapped in red paper had faded. Clara gave me a luxury candle still sealed. I never lit it. I remember saying, "Thank you." She answered flatly, "It's nothing, no need to fuss," then left early for a party with friends. I looked around and realized I'd lived like a shadow in a house I built. I cooked, cleaned, paid the bills, but my presence meant nothing beyond convenience. Even the keepsakes I'd guarded became proof of neglect. The wall clock Bill bought in 1989 kept ticking, the second hand circling, but no one noticed. Just like me, breathing, doing, existing yet unseen. I stopped at last year's Christmas photo. Jacob, Clara, and the two grandkids sat around the table grinning. I was behind them, carving the turkey. No one looked at me. No one waited for me to get in the shot. When they posted it, the caption read, "Perfect moments with family." I remember that night Clara complained the food was saltier than usual. Jacob kept answering work calls, and I sat alone at the sink, washing dishes to their laughter from the living room. I told myself I was being sensitive. Now I know. It wasn't sensitivity. It was the first sign I was being erased from the world I'd held together. I sat down, gripping the table edge. A breeze slipped through the window and lifted a note Clara had left last time. "Mom, don't forget the electric bill. We'll transfer the money later." I laughed, a joyless sound. They never transferred anything. Everything came in the name of, "We're busy, we're struggling, we'll pay soon." Yet they traveled, upgraded cars, bought designer goods. I, their safety net, became a shadow, needing permission to enter her own children's lives. I remembered the last time Jacob visited. He walked in, opened the fridge, and said, "Mom, why's there nothing to eat?" "You should keep the house stocked." I said, "I can't shop much anymore, my heart's weak." He shrugged. "Don't make it complicated, Mom. You don't get how things work now. Everything can be ordered online." Ordinary words, but to me they sounded like a verdict. I, who cooked every meal, knit every sweater, taught him to hold a pencil, was now a burden of the old days. I looked out at the backyard. The lavender I planted when Bill was alive had withered, leaves broken. I remembered Jacob saying last year, "You should sell this house. No point living alone. A nursing home would be best." I forced a smile and said, "I'm fine." That night, I lay awake. Not scared of loneliness, scared my son no longer saw this place as home. I walked room to room like a stranger, feeling my way through the past. The small room where I keep Bill's things was the same, his pocket watch, leather gloves, a Valentine's card from 1983, to the woman who warms every room. I sat on the bed with the card, a tightness in my chest. I used to warm every room, but then I let myself go cold. A strange moment. In the hush, the living room clock carried its tick-tock down the hall. Instead of reminding me time was slipping by, it felt like I was finally hearing my own voice after years of being drowned out. I stood, went to the kitchen, and took an old ledger from the cabinet, the one Bill used for household expenses, now yellow and frayed. I grabbed a pen and breathed deep. My hand trembled, but the line formed anyway. July 15th. The house still stands, but the person who lived in it disappeared. I refuse to be the backdrop for someone else's happiness. I looked up, reading the line, and felt something unhook in my chest. I don't know what the future will be, but at least I admitted what I've dodged for years. I lost myself in sacrifice. I closed the ledger, set it on the table, and sat quietly. Outside, the sun dropped behind the hills. Soft orange light poured through the window, laying a kinder glow over old things. For the first time, the house didn't scare me. It was still empty, still cold, but now the silence wasn't an enemy. It was an ally, a truthful friend reminding me I still had time to start over, to live differently. I clicked on the desk lamp. Its small circle of light fell over the page, highlighting what I'd written. I set my hand on it, feeling my own warmth, the warmth I'd given away for years. "Enough," I whispered. The word floated through the room, light but clear, like a promise to myself. I stood, drew the curtains, and walked the hall. My steps matched the clock's rhythm. Every beat, every small sound in the old house seemed to answer finally. It had an owner again, someone who wouldn't live like a shadow, but like a person in her own light. That night I sat by the window and watched the moon rise. Its glow spilled across the floor, gentle as Bill's voice in memory. "You'll be okay, Evelyn." I smiled. "Yes, I will." For the first time in years, I'm not waiting for anyone to walk through this door. I'm waiting for me, the version I lost long ago, to come home. Next morning, I woke later than usual. Sunlight slipped through the curtains, laying pale gold on the floor. I made a weak cup of coffee, no sugar, no cream, just enough bitterness to remind me I still felt things. The house was so quiet I could hear the spoon tap the mug. I was about to water the brittle lavender on the porch when a knock sounded, 3 polite, familiar taps. I opened the door. Mrs. Peterson, my neighbor across the street, stood there with a warm smile and a small basket. "Good morning, Evelyn," she said, voice low and kind. "I baked apple pie last night. It's lovely. Thought you'd like some." I smiled back. "Thank you. It's been a while since I've had homemade apple pie." She set the basket on my kitchen table and glanced around. "Haven't seen your son lately. Everything okay?" My heart paused for a beat. I tried to smile. "Yes, I suppose. The kids are busy." She nodded, kind eyes sharp. "I get it. Once they're grown, they have activism, their own lives." But she hesitated, then blurted it out. "I saw them taking photos in the yard the other day, suitcases packed. They said they were off to Europe, looked excited." I kept my smile, but my hand shook on the coffee cup. I set it down before I spilled it. "Yes," I said quietly. "I heard that too." She didn't notice the little shock running through me, and went on, casually. "They looked so bright. Your grandkids waved at me. I thought they'd invite you." And then she stopped, as if she realized something, and lightly touched my shoulder. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to pry." I shook my head. "It's fine. I'm glad they're happy." We chatted about small things, weather, flowers, a new shop in town, then she said goodbye. When the door clicked shut, the latch sounded dry, and my smile disappeared with it. The kitchen sank back into silence. I looked at the pie basket on the table, cinnamon and butter drifting up, reminding me of when I baked for my family. Now someone else brought pie to me, a kindness that felt like an accidental condolence. I stepped onto the porch. Blue sky, soft sun, a breeze nudging the weak lavender stems. But inside, something cracked quietly, clearly. Her sentence, "They're in Europe having fun," was a neat, precise cut. It didn't surprise me, I already knew. But hearing it from someone else made it hurt real. No more guessing. No more pretending there might be a reason. No, they really left, and didn't bother hiding it. I sat in the old wooden chair where Bill read the paper every morning. Sunlight stretched across the front yard, where Jacob once learned to ride a bike. I remember when he fell, skinned his knee, cried, and accused, "You didn't run after me." I laughed then, knelt down, cleaned the scrape, and said, "I'm always here. Jacob, you just have to steer." I was always there when he fell, when he stood, when he grew up. I never missed a moment. Now, they vanished without a backward glance. I leaned back and let the wind move through my hair. Part of me wanted to cry, to let it all out, but the tears wouldn't come. I felt a long, blank space, bare but clear. The afternoon light stretched across the porch, my shadow falling at an angle. I remembered the times I'd been forgotten. When I turned 60, I waited all day for Jacob to call. The phone never rang. Late that night, Clara texted, "Sorry, we were busy. Sleep well." I kept that message for 3 years, rereading it like a fool searching for meaning in careless words. I remembered the day Bill died. I quietly arranged the funeral, then cleaned the house alone. Jacob said, "Mom, you're so strong." I smiled. Didn't tell him I wasn't strong. I had no choice. Maybe that's why they think I never need care. Maybe I let them get used to me always being there, I thought. I turned my kindness into something expected. I believed if I stayed quiet and kept loving, they'd notice. But love isn't a candle if one person keeps the flame alone. It goes out. The sun slid behind the roof across the street, leaving a dark red line like a cut across the sky. It looked like me trying to hold a little warmth before the night swallowed it. I stood and went inside. The pie was still on the table. I cut a slice. The gentle sweetness and Granny Smith tartness were lovely, but it went down bitter. I suddenly thought of Bill, how he used to say, "You have a way of making every room warm." I shook my head. "Not anymore, Bill. Warmth only exists when people choose to stay." Night fell. I turned off the lights, leaving one in the living room. I sat by the window. The street was quiet, a pool of lamplight on fallen leaves. Across the way, Mrs. Peterson's house glowed, soft chatter drifting out. It eased me a little, at least there's someone to talk to at night. Then I thought, it's time to stop waiting for the door to open. Stop waiting for someone to return. I've lived my whole life for others. Now I have to learn to live for myself, even if it's late. Even if it's only part of what's left. I picked up the small notebook I'd placed on the table. My hand still trembled, but the letters steadied. I wrote, July 16th. I won't keep making excuses for their absence. I'll look for a reason for me to live. I closed the notebook and sat still. Outside, the wind moved through the trees, a sound like a whisper. It filled the house, not an echo of the past, but the first beat of a new beginning. I looked around. The old house didn't feel so cold. Maybe because I stopped waiting for warmth from someone else. Maybe because, for the first time in a long time, I heard my own voice clearly and calmly. I sipped the last of the coffee and closed my eyes. In the dark, a small thought flickered, tiny, but bright. If they can leave without looking back, I can walk away too, but in a way they'll never forget. I smiled, and it wasn't as bitter as before. Outside, night had settled. Inside me, a different light had just turned on. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. The Texas sky was crystal clear, sunlight slipping through the curtains onto the wooden floor where I sit every morning to make tea. The cool air made it feel like the whole world had been refreshed, except me, still caught in the dust of the past. I looked around the house. Everything was in its old place, quiet, but none of it meant the same anymore. The front door, where Jacob used to burst in after school, now only made me feel cold. I walked over and touched the lock, dulled by years. The metal was cold and worn under my hand. I remembered the last time that door opened, when Clara stormed in without knocking or greeting me, just to ask to borrow the credit card because Jacob was short on cash. I still remember the confusion in her eyes with a hint of contempt, and I said nothing. I just opened my wallet, handed over the card, and watched them leave, the door closing on an empty feeling. I sighed. Every lock in this house felt tied to a memory I'd never dared to change until today. I picked up my phone and randomly chose a number from local services. Lakeside Locksmiths, a young male voice answered. I kept it short. I want to replace every lock in my house. The front door, the back door, and the garage door. All of them, ma'am? He asked, slightly surprised. Yes, every single one. I want all the old keys to be useless. His voice paused for a second, then turned professional. I can be there within an hour. When he arrived, I was tidying the front porch. A man around 30, sturdy build, gray work shirt with Ben stitched on the chest. He gave a polite smile. Hello, I'm Ben. I got your request to change the locks. I nodded and pointed at the front door. This door is very old. I want a new lock, solid and reassuring. Ben bent to look, tapped the hinges, then said, I understand. The door's fine, the lock's just loose. I'll replace it with a pick-resistant type, very secure. No one gets in unless you allow it. I gave a small smile. Good. I only want to open it when I truly need to. The day I held the new set of keys, I knew I had crossed a threshold without needing to look back. Sometimes a small act, closing a door, clearing a corner, can be the first step toward freedom. What do you think? Has a small change ever sent your life in an unexpected direction? Tell me in the comments. He didn't ask anything else, just started working. The drill hummed steadily through the house. To me, it wasn't noisy, it sounded like the first beat of freedom. Each turn of the bit, each clink of metal felt like it was loosening the invisible chains that had bound me for years. I stood back and watched. The morning breeze drifted through the doorway, bringing in the scent of wood and fresh metal. In that moment, I felt oddly lighter. No one could open this door without my permission anymore. Not my son, not my daughter-in-law. No one had the right to step in and steer my life. Ben looked up with a friendly smile. Almost done, ma'am. Do you live alone? I nodded. Yes. And now I'm starting to feel okay with that. He smiled softly, eyes warm. Sometimes being alone is how you find what you really need. That simple sentence made my heart skip. I stayed quiet, watching him finish. He probably didn't know he'd said something it took me a lifetime to learn. By the time he finished, it was near noon. He wiped his hands and handed me a small envelope with shiny new keys inside. Here's the new set 3 keys. I replaced every lock, including the back door and the garage. Now you just turn it like this. I took them, my hand a little unsteady. The keys were small, cool, and gleaming in the sun like ordinary pieces of metal. But to me, they were heavy, like they held a whole part of my life. I gripped them, overwhelmed, like I'd just taken back ownership of my home and, deeper than that, of my life. Thank you, Ben, I said softly, my voice tight. You have no idea how long I've waited for this day. He smiled, didn't ask why, and said, Glad to help. If you need anything, call me. After he left, I stood in front of the newly secured door, the keys still in my hand. The drill was quiet now, but in my head that sound kept echoing like a drum, announcing a new chapter. I turned the key and heard a crisp, solid click. For the first time, the lock didn't sound like confinement, it sounded like freedom. I set the keys on the table and made myself a cup of mint tea. Steam rose in the pale sunlight coming through the curtains. I sat in the wooden chair by the window and looked out at the backyard. The dry lavender bushes were catching the sun, frail, but still standing. A small sight, but enough to make me smile. Maybe I'm like them, drained, withered, but never truly gone. On the table, last night's notebook was still open. I turned to a new page and wrote, July 17th. I changed the locks. The old door is closed, and maybe I just closed the past. I sat still, looking at the shaky but clear line. Outside, the sun was higher, light glinting off the new door handle. I took a sip of tea and felt the warmth spread down my throat. Every breath, every small movement made me feel truly alive. Not existing for others to see, but living for me. In the afternoon, I sat on the porch. The sun dipped behind distant roofs, light fading to amber. I set the new keys in my palm and twisted them gently, listening to the soft metallic clink. A tiny sound, but to me it rang louder than every apology I'd waited years to hear. I looked out at the road where Jacob used to play, where Bill used to mow the lawn every weekend. Now they were just shadows. Strangely, I wasn't sad. I was calm. A light breeze carried the scent of jasmine from the backyard. I closed my eyes and let it move through my silver hair. Inside, a whisper rose quiet but firm. I will never be locked inside silence again. I opened my eyes and looked at the front door with its new lock. The door was closed, but this time it wasn't a barrier between me and the world. It was proof that I had the right to open or close it whenever I chose. And when dusk covered the porch, I knew one thing for sure. Tomorrow, everything would be different. Not because anyone changed, but because I had. I turned the key myself and opened a new life starting with this door. That morning, I sat by the window and watched the sunlight fall on the old car under the tree out front. A 2001 Ford Crown Victoria, faded silver with peeling paint on the rear bumper, the last gift Bill left me. He called it the faithful horse because we drove it all over Texas from Austin to San Antonio, past spring wildflowers and summer, rock hills. I once thought, after Bill died, that car would be the last piece of memory I'd keep. But now, seeing it sit silent in the yard, I felt more than nostalgia. I felt the weight of a rope tying me to the past. I remembered a hot afternoon last summer when Jacob stopped by, looked at the car, then laughed. "This, Mom, come on, who still drives a Crown Victoria? Sell it and I'll get you a small SUV, practical and classy." I just smiled without replying. His words cut without meaning to, because to me the car wasn't metal, it was memory. Those afternoons when Bill drove me to the lake, the radio playing country music, his hand on the wheel, his voice humming along to "Forever and Ever, Amen." But now that I'd changed the locks and closed the past, I understood. Memory doesn't live in objects, it lives in the person who carries it. I don't need to keep what binds me just to prove I still care. I stepped onto the porch, opened the car door, and took a deep breath. The old leather, dust, and oil smells rose up, bringing back younger days. I ran my hand over the steering wheel like a goodbye. Then I went inside and turned on the computer. I looked up a used car dealer in Georgetown, the place where Bill bought the last set of tires before he passed. When the dealer answered, his voice was even. "Yes. How can I help you? Selling a car?" "Yes. A 2001 Crown Victoria, silver, runs fine. Can you send photos? We do home pickup. Price depends on condition." I sent a few pictures I'd just taken in the yard, then waited in silence. 10 minutes later, a message arrived. "We can offer $4,200. We can pick it up today if you agree." I read the number a few times, then typed, "Agreed. I want to sell today." That afternoon, a small white truck pulled up. A young employee checked the papers and handed me the contract. I signed, my hand only shaking a little at the last line, not from doubt, but from realizing this was the first time in years I was doing something simply because I wanted to. When he started the car, the familiar engine noise filled the air, the sound I'd heard 1,000 times when Bill took me for rides. The car rolled slowly down the drive, the late sun gleaming on the silver paint, sparkling like Bill's eyes in my memory. I watched until it turned the corner and disappeared, leaving a golden trail of dust. I thought I would cry. I didn't. I just felt lighter, like I'd slipped a wire off my heart. From now on, I won't let anything keepsake or kin lock me into old days. I went back inside, poured a lemonade, and turned on the computer again. I logged into the bank and moved the entire sale amount into a new account. I opened that morning my own account, not linked to any secondary card Jacob ever used. I set a long password and memorized it. No one knows about this account. Not Jacob, not Clara, no one. When the screen flashed, "Transfer completed," I smiled. A small, cold line of text, but to me, it was a declaration of independence. It's not a lot of money, but it's mine clean, free, and out of reach of hands that take without giving back. I opened a drawer and took out an old file box. Inside was everything: bank books, the house deed, Bill's life insurance, and a stack of credit cards I once shared with Jacob to help him when he started out. I set it all on the table and sorted it again. Those papers once made me feel secure, but now they looked like traps. I took scissors and cut the old cards in half. The snaps were crisp and neat. With every cut, I felt a little brighter. In the afternoon, I borrowed Mrs. Peterson's car and drove to the main bank in Round Rock. The receptionist smiled. "How can we help you today?" "I'd like to open a safe deposit box, a small one." "Of course." "Storing personal assets?" I answered briefly. "Things that belong to me, and only me." She led me to the cruising basement, long white-tiled hall, shining under the lights. Rows of steel doors, each with its own lock. I signed, took the key. When the box opened, I placed a thick envelope inside house deed, insurance documents, and a draft of the will I planned to change. When the door shut, the click sounded like the end of an old chapter. On the way home, wind pushed through the window, carrying the end-of-day sun and a faint field smoke smell. I drove slowly without the radio, just the steady engine and my heartbeat. For the first time in years, I felt like I was steering my own life, no one else's hands on the wheel. That night, I sat at the dining table with a small lamp on. Next to me were the new house keys and the tiny safe deposit key in my palm. Two small things, but they meant more than any asset I've ever owned. I stared at them for a long time. Then wrote in my notebook, July 18th. Sold the car. Moved the money. Opened a safe box. Everything is out of their reach. I looked up at the window. Night had quieted the street. A neighbor's light fell across the yard, catching the lavender stems trembling in the breeze. I smiled softly. Bill would understand. He used to say, "A woman is truly strong when she dares to drive away from the place that makes her feel small." Today I did that, not with wheels, but with will. I closed my eyes and heard a clear sentence inside. If they can exploit me, I can leave them with nothing. Not through revenge, but by reclaiming what should have always been mine: control, self-respect, and freedom. When I opened my eyes, moonlight was resting on the new door handle, gentle as a goodbye to the past. I set my hand on it and whispered, "Thank you, Bill. Thank you for teaching me that some roads only open when we're brave enough to let go." And I knew that from tonight on, my road, even if I walk it alone, will finally be my own. That night, Texas was still. Insects buzzed in the yard, blending with the living room clock's steady tick. I sat alone at the dining table with a small light on the papers before me. Beside it, a cooled cup of mint tea and the old brown notebook, Bill's household ledger. I turned the first page, my pen hand trembling. For some reason, I felt like I was prepping for surgery, not on my body, but on my memory. I would dissect, line by line, number by number, to see how cheaply my love had been sold. I opened the computer and logged into the old bank account, the one Jacob and I once shared, for convenience. The screen pulled up transactions from June and July, the time I was in the hospital. Every line, every number glowed like a cold blade. June 12th. $900, Louis Vuitton, Paris. I exhaled, remembering that was the day I was rushed to the ER, chest crushed like under a stone. The doctor said, if you'd been 10 minutes later, you might not have made it. June 13th. $480, Café Le Dome. I murmured, Café Le Dome, then let out a dry laugh. The day I ate bland hospital soup, they ordered wine in Paris. June 15th. $1,100, business class tickets, Air France. Same day the doctor said I needed urgent heart surgery. I set the pen down, staring at the figures. Each charge was a cut of truth, not bleeding, but draining trust. Not an accident. Not a misunderstanding. A deliberate choice. To leave their mother in a life or death moment. To spend her money in the most luxurious place in the world. I turned the page. $320, Dîner Romantique, Nice. $260, Boutique Blue Hotel Room. $780, shopping at Chanel. My eyes burned, but there were no tears left. I didn't have the strength to cry. I felt like I was standing outside my own life, watching a bad movie where I'd only ever been a supporting character. I wrote it out, carefully, line by line. June 12th. I was in the ER. They were in Paris. June 15th. I signed surgical consent. They booked business class. June 18th. I woke up after surgery. They paid for a hotel in Nice. By the last line, my hand stopped shaking. A strange feeling spread through me, cold and sharp. Maybe this is what people mean by clarity. I clipped together all the bank documents, card statements, and stray receipts Clara left in the car. I sorted them into sections and labeled them in red pen, what they owe. I sealed the folder, even wiping my hands before touching it. When the file closed, I stared at it for a long time. It wasn't paperwork anymore, it was evidence. Not for a lawsuit, but for memory. So if one day I weaken, I can open it and read. Outside, the wind picked up, nudging the curtains. I looked into the yard, long shadows blurred in the neighbor's light. The loneliness was still there, but beneath it was something stronger, resolve. I stood, grabbed my coat. The file was ready on the table. I decided I would take it to an attorney in the morning. The next morning, a light mist lingered. I drove to downtown Round Rock. The law office sat on a small corner red tile roof. Modest sign, Carter and Lewis Legal Counsel. A slender man around 50, salt and pepper hair Richard Carter greeted me. He'd handled Bill's tax work years ago. Good to see you, Mrs. Mercer. How can I help today? He asked, gentle voice, sharp eyes. I set the folder on his desk. I need advice on changing my inheritance. He opened it and skimmed a few pages. His brows pulled together when he saw the statements. These are your cards? Yes, I said quietly. But they used them. While I was in the hospital, they went to Europe. He looked up, disbelief in his eyes. You want to remove them from your inheritance? I do. Silence settled over the room. The wall clock's tick sounded endless. Finally, he put his pen down and looked straight at me. Are you sure, Evelyn? This will completely change your estate. Once signed, it can't be undone. I looked out the window where early light reflected off the glass. I saw my reflection, a silver-haired woman, back straight, eyes clearer than ever. I smiled a little. Mr. Carter, I've lived 70 years for other people. This is the first time I'm living for myself. I've never been more sure. He nodded slowly. All right, we'll redo the will. Do you want to leave it to anyone? I paused a few seconds, then said, I want it to go to the Round Rock Community Scholarship Fund, so kids who work hard can go farther than greed ever does. He looked at me with quiet respect. I understand. Please sign here. I picked up the pen. The black ink touched the page, moving slowly but decisively. When the last stroke was done, I set the pen down and took a deep breath. Relief spread through me like shedding armor I'd worn too long. Mr. Carter said softly, "That's it. From now on, your assets are out of their reach." I smiled. Out of reach, but not out of lesson. One day they'll understand. Not everyone who grows old is weak, and not everyone who's quiet is blind. On the way home, I rolled the window down and let the wind in. Trees slipped by, sunlight flickering through the leaves onto my face. I felt like I was floating between two worlds behind me. A past of being used. Ahead, a present that's bright and free. Back home, I put the file in the safe, next to the keys and the notebook. I opened the notebook and wrote, July 19th. I signed, "Nothing belongs to them anymore." I'm free not because they changed, but because I stopped waiting. I set the pen down and looked at the words, feeling like I'd been born a second time, not in a hospital, but in a house of clarity. On the porch, sunlight poured gold. A breeze ran through the lavender, and the scent drifted across the room. I smiled and told myself, I don't need to take back what they took, because what they'll never have ever is this peace. And I knew that from today on, my footsteps won't echo in a house of fear, but in a home of freedom. The next morning, when the first sunlight touched the living room window, I called Miranda Holt, a real estate agent Mrs. Peterson once recommended. I kept it brief on the phone. "I want to sell my house." There was a brief pause, then a woman's voice, quick but warm. "I can come this afternoon, Mrs. Evelyn. Your address is 112 Willow Creek, right?" I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Yes. Green door. White fence. That afternoon, Miranda arrived in a simple cream dress, holding a notebook and a camera. She was around 40, petite, bright-eyed, with the confidence of someone who knows her work and her worth. She shook my hand, professional but not cold. "Your home has a distinct presence," she said. "It keeps its classic structure but still feels warm. That's rare." I just smiled without replying. We walked down the hall where the family photos still hung. Miranda stopped at my wedding photo with Bill from 1975. Her eyes softened. "Your husband must have been a good man. I can see the trust between you in that picture." I nodded slightly, my voice low. "Yes, he was so good that I forgot I needed care too." Miranda smiled and didn't pry. She took out her notebook and carefully recorded every detail: oak window frames, maple floors, the roof replaced 4 years ago, and the backyard where a few lavender stalks were still in bloom. She said, "If we spruce up the kitchen a bit and repaint the exterior, this house could sell high, Mrs. Evelyn. The market's really strong." I let out a small, genuine laugh. "It's worth more to someone who knows how to cherish it, Miranda. Money can't buy the warmth this home once had." She looked up at me, as if she understood. "I think you don't just want to sell a house, you want to end a story." "That's right," I answered softly, "and start another one." After she left, I sat alone in the living room. Sunset poured through the window, laying a honey-colored glow over the old rug. The house was so quiet, I could hear the wind slipping through the door jamb, soft and long. I looked around, the chair where Bill used to read the paper, the landscape painting he bought on our trip to Colorado, the crystal vase. Clara always said, "You should leave to me." Everything was still there, but their spirit had left with him long ago. That night, I sat in the middle of the living room, spread my mother's old cloth, and began wrapping small things. Our wedding photo, a few letters Bill wrote when we were young, the wool scarf my mother knitted the winter I turned 18, I wrapped them separately, carefully, as if I might hurt the memories. I placed everything in a small wooden box and labeled it, "Things I'm taking with me." Beside it was Another pile, the things Jacob and Clara used to say belonged to them. The antique china set, the silver frame, the little table Bill refurbished for our grandchild. I looked at them for a long time, then just smiled. I didn't touch them. I didn't sell them. I didn't take them. I left them as they were, because I knew it wouldn't be long before they disappeared from their hands in a way they would never expect. I packed through the night. With each fold of paper, it felt like I was shedding an old skin, the skin of the patient mother, the dutiful wife, the woman who always stayed. When dawn broke, I looked around the room. Only a few truly necessary things remained. The heaviness was gone. I exhaled, light as if I had just stepped out of a decades-long dream. 3 days later, Miranda returned. She brought a folder and an appraisal. Mrs. Evelyn, I reached out to a few potential buyers. 2 young couples really love this house. They said it feels like it has a soul. I smiled. Maybe that soul is ready to leave and find another piece. She opened the paperwork and set the contract in front of me. This is the final offer, higher than I expected. If you agree, we can sign this week. I looked at the page, at the line that read, New Owner. In the past, I used to fear this moment, afraid to sign, afraid to lose the place I'd tied half my life to. But today, my hand didn't shake. I read every line carefully, then picked up the pen and signed my name. As the black ink dried, it felt like I'd just written the most beautiful goodbye of my life. Miranda smiled at me. Thank you for trusting me. Would you like me to help you find a new place? No need, I said. I already have a plan. A small house near the ocean, quiet enough to hear the waves. She nodded with respect. I understand. I hope you find what you need. I don't need to find it, I said, my voice low but warm. I just need to remember that peace isn't a place, it's the decision to leave. When Miranda left, I stood in the doorway and watched her car disappear. The wind moved through the yard and the for sale sign trembled, its metal edge catching the morning sun. I looked at it for a long time, as if I were looking at my life, finally hung out in the open after years of hiding in the shadows. That evening, I opened the windows to let the night breeze in. The house echoed with emptiness, no more furniture, no cooking smells, only the afterglow of years that were once warm. Strangely, I didn't feel loss. I felt relief, as if each item sold and each wall about to belong to someone else took away another layer of old memories weighing on my shoulders. I took out my notebook and wrote another line. July 25th. I signed the papers to sell the house. These walls won't hold me anymore. I'm buying back peace with my own leaving. I set down the pen and looked around. Darkness was rising to the ceiling, but moonlight still fell softly through the window. I sat in silence, listening to crickets and the wind slipping through the cracks, and realized this silence was no longer loneliness. It was the sound of freedom breathing. When I went to bed, the key ring rested in my hand, the new house keys, the safe deposit key, and the key that now only symbolized a house already sold. I smiled, squeezed lightly, then let go. The small clink when they touched the table was quiet but far-reaching, like a bell marking the end of a journey. And I knew tomorrow, when I leave this house, I won't look back. Because everything I need to carry is already in me. Courage and the peace I bought back for myself. The next morning, sunlight slipped through the bare frame of the window and fell on freshly painted walls. My house, or rather the house that used to be mine, was neat, bright, ready for its new owner. I made a cup of tea and sat down, looking at the sealed boxes stacked in the corner. Most were labeled give, keep, discard. Only one thing remained untouched, the family album on the shelf in the middle of the living room. It had sat there for years, like part of the furniture. No one opened it, no one asked. But today, I decided this would be the last time I turned its pages. I pulled a chair close and took it down. The leather cover was worn, photo edges curled, the old paper scent rising like the smell of time. I opened the first page, a wedding at a church in Austin, 1975. Bill and me, hand in hand, smiling bright in the June sun. We both believed in forever, but no one teaches you that sometimes forever lasts only until someone's last breath. The next page was Jacob's 6th birthday, train-shaped cake, me in a paper hat standing behind him. I remember Bill saying, "This boy will fly high someday, but don't forget to keep a place for yourself when he needs to come back." I kept that promise my whole life, but in the end, I was the one with no place to return to. I kept turning the pages, Christmas, birthdays, graduations. My face was in almost every photo, but usually at the edges. I was never the center. I was the one who prepared, who took the pictures, who cleaned up, the one in the corner of the frame, smiling, tired but gentle. I smiled not bitterly, but with understanding. A mother's love doesn't always need gratitude, but it does need to be seen, and they never saw me. I stood up and took a thick envelope from my pocket, the one I'd prepared. Inside were bank statements, a few screenshots from social media, the photos they posted in Paris while I was in the hospital, and a handwritten letter. I slid the letter out and placed it on the album's last page. Black ink, neat strokes. When I fought to live, you chose round-trip business class tickets. When I lay in a cold room, you raised glasses under Paris lights. I once thought a mother's love could forgive anything, but love can't save a heart that's already gone cold. I'm not angry, only sad that I taught you how to love but never taught you how to keep compassion. I paused, then wrote on, "I forgive, but I don't forget. And I am no longer someone you can leave behind. From now on, I won't wait for doors to open, I'll walk through another door myself. When you come back, if you do, remember, some wounds don't need to be healed, they just need to be acknowledged." I folded the letter, sealed it in the envelope along with the statements and photos, and wrote on the outside, "For those who come late." I flipped back to the first page and skimmed the faces that once were my whole world: Bill, Jacob, Clara, the 2 grandkids. My fingers trembled on the photo, but there were no more tears. I only whispered, "If you come back someday, open this. And for the first time, read instead of just looking." I gently returned the album to its place, center shelf, in the living room, where it would be easy to find. They'd go for it first when they returned. And when they opened it, they wouldn't find the compliant mother they remembered. They'd meet the woman who left them for good in the only way they never expected. Deliberate silence. When I closed the glass cabinet, afternoon light streamed through the window and laid a soft gold over the album cover. It felt like Bill saying, "Hello, quiet, warm, and full of understanding." I took a deep breath, went back to the table, and opened my laptop. On the screen was Amtrak's website. I searched routes heading south in Texas. The endpoint was a small coastal town called Silver Bay. The name sounded like a promise, the silver of freedom, a place where no one knows my name, no one calls me only to ask for favors, and no one ties love to conditions. I chose the Saturday morning train. A standard seat in a quiet car. When the confirmation page popped up, I paused a few seconds, then clicked, "Confirm." A small ding sounded, and for a moment, my heart felt lighter than ever. I printed the ticket, folded it neatly, and tucked it into my wallet with a small photo of Bill. In it, he's smiling, hair blown wild by the wind, holding his old straw hat. I whispered, "Bill, I'm going. Maybe this time I'll find the place we always talked about, the one with sun, the sea, and no one who needs me to sacrifice anymore." That afternoon, I walked the house one last time. Each room brought back laughter, voices, and those long stretches of quiet. I ran my hand along the walls, like saying goodbye to an old friend who had seen everything but never judged. I stopped at the living room window and looked out at the street. The maple across the way had turned early this year, blazing yellow in the sun. I remembered Bill saying, "You know, trees are smart. They change leaves before the leaves have a chance to rot." I let out a small laugh. Maybe I'm learning to change my own leaves. Back inside, I closed the little suitcase, just enough room for a few outfits, a notebook, the photo, and some cash. I don't need much. I only need to be light. Before leaving the room, I looked back one last time. The album was still there, right in the center of the shelf, silent but unmistakable. I walked over, set my hand on its spine, and said softly, "Goodbye, house, and goodbye to the old version of me." The door clicked shut behind me. I stood on the porch, the air carrying the scent of lavender and fresh paint. Calm spread through me, not because I left the past, but because I finally wasn't afraid to face it. I pulled my suitcase down the steps and looked at the wide Texas sky. Late sunlight caught the "for sale" sign and made it gleam like molten metal. I smiled. In that light, I didn't look like someone left behind. I looked like someone who chose her own direction. So I stepped forward, feet steady on the old path, my heart full of something simple and rare. True peace, the peace I traded half a lifetime to get back. I had been gone from Round Rock exactly 7 days. On the train to Silver Bay, I sat by the window and watched Texas fields fall away behind me. The engine let out a long call, metal grinding the rails in a steady rhythm like a heartbeat, reminding me I was truly leaving it all. I didn't look back. Behind me, the house door had closed, the old locks were replaced, and on the coffee table the album still lay with a sealed envelope marked, "For those who come late." I pictured the moment they returned and what would happen, not because I wanted revenge, but because I knew truth would eventually speak for itself, cold but fair. A week later, on Sunday morning on the other side of Texas, Jacob and Clara hauled suitcases from the rental SUV at the airport. Sunlight hit their tanned faces, bright smiles, voices buzzing with the excitement of an expensive vacation. "Finally home," Clara laughed, fixing her sunglasses. "I missed our bed so much." Jacob laughed too. "Yeah, Mom will be happy to see us. Looks like she's doing better." They didn't know that while they were sipping wine in Paris, I had quietly erased every trace of them from my life, like a change of season on a soft wind. When the car stopped in front of the old house, Clara tilted her head toward the window. "Huh, why's the fence repainted? And where's the "for sale" sign?" Jacob shrugged. "Maybe Mom did a little fixing up. She likes her little projects." They rolled the suitcases up to the porch and slid a key into the lock. It didn't fit. Jacob frowned and tried again. Click, no turn. He glanced at his wife. "Looks like she changed the locks." Clara scowled. "Why would she do that without telling us?" Jacob pulled out his phone and called. It rang once, twice, 3 times, no answer. He tried again, still nothing. Clara's irritation rose. "It's like she's avoiding us on purpose." They walked around back and peered through the window. Inside, empty. No table, no chairs, no family photos. White curtains lifted softly in the breeze, sunlight reflecting on bare wooden floors. Clara's mouth fell open. "Jacob, where's the furniture?" He froze, heart pounding. "No way," he muttered. "Maybe she moved things out to redo the interior." From the fence, Mrs. Peterson appeared with garden shears, her voice raspy but cheerful. "Oh, you two are back." They turned, relieved. "Hi, Mrs. Peterson," Clara said, forcing a smile. "Do you know where my mom is?" Mrs. Peterson raised her brows, surprised. "What? She didn't tell you?" "She moved. Last week. Sold the house, too." Silence dropped like a sheet. Jacob thought he'd misheard. Sold the house?" he said, his voice going rough. "That's impossible. This house is hers." "That's right, Mrs. Peterson said plainly, "and she has the right to do it. I even helped her pack those days." She looked lighter, like she'd dropped a heavy load. Clara felt the ground pulled out from under her. "And where did she go?" "She didn't say. Just told me, when they come back, tell them I'm fine." Mrs. Peterson paused, then pointed at the door. "Oh, I think she left an envelope taped there." Jacob hurried over, heart thudding. Sure enough, centered on the door was a white envelope, carefully taped, clearly labeled, "Don't worry, I'm fine. I just chose differently than you." His hand trembled slightly as he opened it. Inside was a letter, familiar handwriting, neat and a stack of printed pages. He read slowly, each line dropping heavy into the air. "Jacob, Clara, by the time you read this, I've left. Not out of anger, but because I finally learned that love can't live where people only know how to take. While I was in surgery, you chose wine and business class tickets. I don't blame you. Blame would only make me like you. But I can't keep living as the person who holds the wallet for someone else's happiness. I forgive, but I don't forget. These are the bank statements, the bills from Paris and Nice, and the plane tickets you charged to my card. I've spoken with an attorney. From today on, none of my assets are within your reach. I hope that when this door closes, you'll open another one for yourselves." Jacob stopped reading, knuckles white. Clara stood beside him, tears falling silently. He flipped through the attached pages, bank statements, hotel invoices, every number clear, every charge lining up with the days his mother was in the hospital. Each page was an accusation. Each number a cut to the conscience. Clara choked out, I didn't think she'd find out. I thought she..." "Enough," Jacob cut in, voice raw. "You thought she'd stay silent forever, didn't you?" He threw the papers down on the porch. Wind caught them, whipping statements across the yard like a small storm. One snagged on the fence, another drifted to the lavender pot where she used to drink tea. From a distance, Mrs. Peterson only shook her head. "Honestly, kids, she's not angry. But I've never seen anyone leave so at peace. Maybe because she knows that, in the end, the heart has its own justice." Jacob didn't answer. He sat on the steps and held his head. Sweat slid down his temple, mixed with something heavier and deeper: regret. Clara sat beside him, quietly sobbing. "What do we do now, Jacob? Did she really leave us?" He looked at the empty house, then at the key in his hand, a key with no lock left to open. "No," he said softly. "Mom didn't leave. She just gave us back what we gave her." Silence. They sat a long time on the porch under the harsh sun. No laughter, no complaints, only the wind and scattered statements at their feet, silent witnesses to a storm without thunder. From farther down the street, the buyer's car horn sounded. A young couple got out, smiling as they walked into the yard. Jacob watched them open the gate and sign papers with Miranda. He didn't move closer. He didn't say a word. None of it belonged to him anymore. Not the house. Not the money. Not the mother who used to stand over a pot of chicken soup for him late at night. As the wind rose, Clara bent to pick up the letter and read the last line again. At the bottom, there was a small sentence they'd missed. "If the day comes when you learn what loss feels like, I hope you'll also learn how to grow up the way I had to." She folded the letter, tears spotting the page. "She doesn't hate us, Jacob. She just doesn't want to belong to anyone anymore." He didn't answer. He stared into the empty space ahead where the moving truck had driven off, taking the past with it. "Mrs. Peterson looked at the two of them and went inside, her voice fading into the wind. "Sometimes storms don't come to destroy. They come to teach people how to rebuild. and on those old steps among the fluttering sheets of paper, two people sat with their heads bowed and a torn envelope where the handwritten words, "For those who come late," still stood bold. Like a prophecy that needed no reminder. Afternoons in Silver Bay have a special kind of light, not harsh, not golden, but a soft silver spread over the water like an old mirror. I'd been here nearly 10 days, in a small cottage rented from a widowed woman, just a few steps from the sand. The place had only 2 rooms, a tiny kitchen and a living room that faced the ocean. At night, the waves hit the shore like my own heartbeat, low, steady, alive. I lived slowly, morning coffee, midday walks, evenings reading, and writing letters to myself. No one knew who I was. No one asked why a silver-haired woman lived alone by a quiet beach. And I didn't owe anyone an explanation. Here, I was a free person, not somebody's mother or someone's financial guarantor. But that afternoon, just as the gulls dipped toward the water, I heard a car stop by the gate. A strange sound, tires on gravel, then familiar voices cutting through the wind. "Mom, are you in there?" I stood still. I didn't have to look to know it was Jacob, and Clara would be right behind. I took a deep breath, set my teacup down, and walked to the door. The door opened. There they were, sunburned, tired, eyes mixed with anger and confusion. I gave a small smile. "You got here faster than I thought." Clara sniffled, and Jacob clenched his fists, trying to hold himself together. "Mom, you really sold the house?" he asked, voice rough. "All the furniture, everything, gone. What are you going to do with the money?" I leaned lightly against the doorframe and looked out at the ocean. The waves kept rolling, and far off a small fishing boat bobbed. "I used it to come here," I said softly, "to a place where peace isn't for sale, and being alone doesn't mean being lonely." Jacob stepped forward, voice sharp. "Peace? You left, cut us off, didn't say a word. Do you know how worried we were?" I looked my son straight in the eyes. "Worried?" I repeated, my voice steady. "Jacob, where were you when your mother was in the hospital? When I'd just had heart surgery? Who did the nurse have to call to sign the papers?" He froze and looked away. Clara let out a small sob. "Mom, we never meant to hurt you. We just needed a little break." I gave a small laugh, not bitter, just tired. "A break on your mother's credit card? With the money I set aside in case I needed another emergency?" Silence. The waves filled the gaps between our words. I stepped onto the porch and pointed to the wooden chair across from me. "Sit. I don't want to shout into the wind." They sat, like 2 kids called to the front of the class. I slowly poured more tea and set the cups in front of them. "Clara, you asked in your letter, don't you love us?" I paused, looking at my daughter-in-law. "If I didn't love you, I wouldn't have stayed quiet for 10 years. But there comes a day when you realize love doesn't mean enduring everything." I opened my small notebook and turned the pages, numbers of expenses, dates I had recorded. "Here, Jacob. The day you withdrew $800 to pay a company debt, I had to cancel my follow-up appointment. The day Clara bought a dress for $1,200, I had to ask to postpone the electric bill. On my birthday, you sent one text, then 2 hours later I saw photos of you having dinner in Houston with friends." I stopped, my voice lower. "You thought I didn't know." But I was quiet so I could watch. Jacob clenched his fists, eyes burning red. "Mom, why do this? Why not say something sooner?" "Because no one listens when you speak early," I answered. "People only listen when they lose control." I looked out at the ocean. Waves crashed against the rocks, spraying white foam. When Bill died, I thought keeping the house meant keeping the family. I was wrong. Keeping a house doesn't keep love. Keeping love doesn't keep respect. I once believed love alone could fix everything. Now I understand love can't survive in the hands of someone who treats it like a bank account. Clara cried, her voice breaking. I was wrong. You can scold me, even hate me, just don't leave us. You're the only family we have left. I looked at her, my eyes soft but my voice firm. Clara, you haven't lost me. You've lost the person willing to carry your consequences for you. I opened my bag, took out a blue envelope, and placed it on the table. This is a copy of my new will. Everything house, money, insurance has been donated to the Round Rock Fund for orphans and isolated seniors. Jacob jolted, his face flushing. You can't do that. I raised my head and met his eyes. I already did. My voice was clear, not loud, not angry, but heavy enough to silence him. The sea breeze lifted my hair. It felt as if every strand of wind was helping me balance between the past and the present. I'm not doing this to punish anyone. I want the rest of my life to matter, I said slowly. There are children who've never been called son or daughter. There are elders who die alone because their kids are taking a break. I used to fear I'd end up like them. Not anymore. Clara lowered her head as tears fell onto the back of her hand. Jacob stared at the ocean, eyes wet but stubborn. You think this is right? You're destroying our family. I shook my head. Family can't be destroyed, Jacob. It only collapses when people stop respecting each other. I'm not destroying anything, I'm walking away from the wreckage. He said nothing. Only the wind whistled through the window. I looked at my son, the child who once held my hand across the played schoolyard, who feared the dark, who said, "Mom, you're my hero." Now in front of me stood a lost man, certain everything belonged to him until nothing did. Jacob, I said softly, you asked why I didn't speak sooner. The truth is, I did. You just didn't hear me. You heard the sound of money, the praise of other people, but not the sound of your mother's heart growing weaker day by day. He bowed his head, shoulders trembling. The ocean wind blew harder, rich with salt. I knew the real storm wasn't offshore, it was breaking inside the boy who once was my whole world. After a long time, Clara spoke, barely above a whisper. Can you forgive us, even a little? I was silent for a long while. Then I said quietly, forgiveness is something I gave a long time ago. But going back, no. I've gone too far to return to being the person who's forgotten. I stood, stepped down onto the porch. The waves hit hard, flinging white spray over my bare feet. I turned to look at the two of them, one with head bowed, the other wiping tears. You think I'm lonely, I said, but you're wrong. Here, I hear the waves every morning and watch the sunset every night. I feel more alive than ever. And strangely, in being alone, I found what I'd lost for years. Myself. Jacob looked up, eyes rimmed red. Are you coming back? I smiled, gazing toward the horizon where the sun was sinking. When the ocean stops stirring and my heart stops beating. For now, I still have work to do helping the children no one has ever called son or daughter. I went back inside, took a shawl, and wrapped it around my shoulders. You can stay tonight, the other room is open. But in the morning, go home. Don't look for me again. They stood, hesitant. The wind tossed my hair around my face. Warm orange light lay over everything. I spoke softly but clearly. Don't be angry at me for choosing differently than you did. Be angry that you didn't choose me when you had the chance. No one said another word. The waves kept breaking on the shore, a reminder that some goodbyes don't need fireworks, silence is loud enough. When the door closed, I stood inside, listening to the wind sweep over the roof and the wheels rolling slowly away. I exhaled, feeling as if the last weight had finally left my heart. Outside, the sea still surged, but for me, the storm had passed. The next morning, I woke before dawn. The first light slipped through the curtains, painting a long stripe across the faded wooden floor. The waves kept their rhythm, but today they sounded different. Lighter. Warmer. like the ocean breathing slowly. I opened the door, stepped barefoot onto the porch, and took a deep breath. The air was salty, with seaweed and morning mist filling every cell in my lungs. The sky shifted from purple to orange to pale yellow soft bands of color woven together, like my mother's old wool scarf she wrapped around me each winter. I leaned on the wooden rail, feeling the breeze cool against my silver hair. For the first time in months, my heart beat steady without the heaviness. I brewed a cup of jasmine tea and settled into the wicker chair on the porch, watching the sea brighten. A new day began not with texts, bills, or calls from children who needed money, but with absolute stillness. As the sun lifted over the horizon, I decided to walk. The path to the beach is only a few dozen steps from the cottage. The sand was cool, fine, and damp underfoot. Each step left a clear print, then the waves erased it right away like the ocean saying, "Let the past go. Don't hold on." A few fishermen were hauling in their nets, men with sun-browned skin, pants rolled up, easy smiles on their faces. I greeted them, and they called back in a Texas meets seaside drawl. "Morning, miss. Beautiful day, huh?" I laughed and answered, "Beautiful indeed. The kind you want to remember." I helped free a few fish from the mesh, then sat on the shore to watch them pull the boat in. No one asked where I came from or why I lived alone. In Silver Bay, people care about the present, whether the sun is out, whether the catch is good, whether the morning tea is sweet enough. I like that simplicity. It's the medicine I needed after a lifetime of complicating everything for other people. A little girl, about 8, a fisherman's daughter, ran over and handed me a white seashell. "This is for you, Miss Eve. I found it this morning." I smiled, surprised. "Why do you call me Eve?" She grinned, 2 baby teeth missing. "Everybody calls you Miss Eve." I laughed. Miss Eve. Strange and familiar at the same time. Not Mom, not Grandma, not Mrs. Mercer. Just me, a woman with her own name and her own life. From then on, that name followed me. In this small town, people greeted me with, "Morning, Miss Eve. Tea smells great today, Miss Eve. What are you writing, Miss Eve?" Each time I heard it, a little warmth rose in my chest. In the afternoons, I often stopped by the cottage next door to visit the Dempseys, a couple in their 70s who moved from Houston to retire in Silver Bay. Mrs. Dempsey loves mint tea. Mr. Dempsey loves old stories from his days as a traffic cop. I sat between them, listened, and shared pieces of my life, but not the sad parts. I talked about roads I once drove down with Bill. Rainy nights we listened to music in the kitchen, and how I used to be afraid of living alone. Mrs. Dempsey smiled kindly. "At our age, fear doesn't do much good anymore, Miss Eve. Only peace is worth keeping." I nodded, tightening my fingers around the teacup. Yes, peace. Not because no one can hurt you anymore, but because you stop letting them. At night, I no longer measured time by the wall clock, but by waves and moonlight. I wrote every evening beside a small yellow lamp. At first it was just notes, then it became pages of a memoir, not about pain, I'd written that in my head long enough, but about freedom. I wrote about changing the locks, selling the car, signing the house papers, about standing on the train platform, ticket in hand, knowing I was headed in my own direction. I wrote with calm, no justification. No need for anyone's approval. Once, Mrs. Dempsey saw the draft and asked, "Who are you writing for, Miss Eve?" I smiled. "For me, 10 years ago. If she's still out there somewhere, I want to tell her. Every door can open if you're brave enough to turn the key." She nodded, eyes shining. Sometimes at night, the phone on the table buzzed, Jacob's name, sometimes Clara's, once a number I didn't recognize, probably their lawyer. I watched the screen light up and go dark. I didn't answer. Not out of hate, but because I've learned to choose silence without feeling guilty. One night, I let it ring longer than usual. When it stopped, I looked out the window. The moon laid a silver road across the water. I smiled. Maybe they need time to understand, just as I needed time to stop enduring. Every morning I still wake early. I walk the shore, greet the fishermen, pick up a few shells, then come home to write another page. Outside, the waves keep time like the steady heartbeat of a life that's finally real. A little boy once asked me, "Miss Eve, aren't you scared to live by yourself?" I chuckled and patted his head. "I'm not living by myself, honey. I'm living with myself. That's the difference." He nodded, not fully getting it but smiling anyway. That afternoon, I went home, opened my notebook, and added a small line at the bottom of the page. For the first time in decades, I feel safe not because someone is watching over me, but because no one else holds a key to my heart. I set the pen down and listened to the surf, like an old friend singing me to sleep. Outside, the sun sank, washing the insert. Water and gold like liquid metal. I closed the notebook, poured more tea, leaned back, and shut my eyes. There's nothing left to reclaim, nothing left to prove. Only peace, the thing I spent nearly a lifetime learning had been here all along, waiting for me to be brave enough to return. Night in Silver Bay is so quiet I can hear the waves breathing against the rocks, steady as my own breath. On the table, a small lamp casts warm light onto the worn notebook, the journal I've written in every night since leaving Round Rock. The last page is blank, and I know it's time to close it. I dip the pen and write slowly, each word careful, as if not to disturb the calm wrapped around this little cottage. I'm 70 years old, and I finally learned that loving myself isn't selfish. It's the only way to live true. I pause and look out the window. Moonlight lays a milky sheen over the sea. I think of the women I've met or glimpsed on trains, in hospital waiting rooms, in old cafes. Mothers so gentle they forgot their own worth. They always say, "It's okay," even when their hearts are torn. They smile to keep the peace. They give in so they won't be called difficult. I used to be one of them. I believed silence was love, endurance was noble. Until the day I understood, when love runs only one way, it isn't love, it's depletion. I close the notebook softly and listen to the wind slide through the cracks. Outside, small waves keep tapping the shore, whispering to anyone patient enough to hear. I wonder how many mothers are sitting like I am, alone in a quiet room, late at night, looking back over the years and asking, who did I live for? If someone is listening to me now, I want to say this. Don't wait until it's too late to remember you deserve love too. Family isn't just shared blood. Family is who stays when you collapse. The hand that reaches out when you lose your balance. The gentle voice that says, "It's okay, I'm here." I once thought I'd lost everything, the house, the children, the sense of belonging, but sometimes losing is how you find. In Silver Bay, I found my laugh again, my voice again, and the heart I thought had grown old. I smile at the night sea. Distant fishing lights shimmer like stars. The air is salty and cool. I rest my head on the window frame, feel my heartbeat blend with the surf, and for the first time in years, I don't feel empty. I feel at peace. I whisper to myself, or to anyone hearing this somewhere out there, if you've been forgotten, dismissed, or pushed to doubt your worth, remember, you still have the right to stand up, walk away, and begin again. It's never too late to unlock your life. A stronger gust stirs the thin curtain. I look up at the low-hung full moon, and I know that if Bill, my husband, could see me, he'd be smiling. He used to say, "Eve, one day you have to live like no one needs you anymore, because that's when you're truly free." Now I understand. I put the notebook in the small drawer and switch off the lamp. The only light left is the moon, gentle and enough. I sit back by the window, gaze at the wide ocean, and whisper, "True peace at last." I close my eyes and let the sea breeze comb through my hair, carrying a hint of lavender from the backyard. In that moment, I don't feel like someone who lost anything, but someone who found everything starting with herself. I know somewhere, on the other side of the screen, you may be hearing my story, maybe from Texas, Florida, or across the ocean. Thank you for giving your time to a 70-year-old woman learning again how to live, how to love, and how to forgive. If you've ever felt forgotten, if you've woken up and realized the people you love have drifted away, tell your story in the comments. I want to listen. Maybe, in your voice, I'll find a piece of myself. And if this story made you pause for a few seconds, softened your heart, or reminded you of someone you still need to say thank you or goodbye to, please tap like, subscribe, and come back for the next part. Not because I need more viewers, but because I believe we all need more stories of courage and renewal. Thank you for staying with me to the very end. Thank you for listening to the voice of someone who once thought she was only a shadow. And tonight, if you look out your window and see the moon's pale path on the water, remember that somewhere in Silver Bay, there's a woman writing, living, and smiling for both of us.